All right. Hi, it's our bonus class. And so what we're going to do is talk about finding how you find the new and full moons in your chart. And we're going to look at the Aries new moon and Libra full moon. And we're using Allison's and Karen's charts as example charts. And those charts on the resource page, but I'm also going to bring them up on screen here so you don't have to worry about having those open elsewhere. And it might be helpful to have a copy of your own chart handy. Because then you can make sure that everything I'm saying translates into using your own chart, which is the goal here. So, so this is going to be quite informal, meaning chime in at any time, ask any question that arises, although I will ask that the questions be interesting for everyone. So in other words, I'm not going to answer personal, interpretation questions about your own chart. But definitely if you don't understand what I'm talking about or how I get where I'm going, then interrupt me. And to unmute yourself, there's a little microphone icon in the lower left of your screen. And if you click on that, that should unmute you. And there's also a chat option. So if anytime you want to send a note, you can use the little chat thing. And I might not, hi Tara, and I might not see it right away if I'm in the middle of talking. Hi ladies, more ladies gathering, yay. Okay, and I'm just saying, unmute yourself anytime, ask any questions. This is cash, this is informal here. I'm hoping that we'll have time to also talk about Mercury retrograde and how to find where the upcoming Mercury retrograde is happening in your chart. Okay, so I'm just gonna bring a chart up on the screen. Oops, that's not the chart I want, but that's the Aries new moon chart. Actually, not Allison's chart. Okay. I'm gonna reshare that. Hi, Kirsten. Yay. Okay. So I have on the screen Allison's chart. She was one of our example chart winners. And sometimes the share screen is a little bit wonky. So if someone could let me know if you're not seeing a chart on the screen, that would be helpful. And otherwise, I'm going to assume that it's okay that we're all seeing this chart here. Okay, so I know that we've got ladies at various levels of astro experience here. And I'm going to break everything down and start at the very beginning. So this might be too basic for some of you, and then it'll get more interesting. But the first thing that I want to talk about are, I want to give you kind of an introduction to what we're looking at when we look at a birth chart, or any chart really. So on the outer wheel, we've got the symbols for the signs. This is our friend Aries, the ram's horns. And the wheel is going counterclockwise. So Aries is the first sign, then we've got Taurus here, then Gemini, and so on. So this is really useful to know when you're trying to find where something is happening in your chart. It's useful to know that the wheel is going counterclockwise through the signs. So that's the outer wheel, the symbols for the signs. And the signs roughly correlate to constellations, but not exactly. And then we see that there's these numbers, these degrees in front of each sign. So the way it works is that we've got this wheel of the zodiac, this wheel of 12 signs, and each sign is broken into 30 degrees. So every sign gets 30 degrees, making up a wheel of 360 degrees. And this is useful because then we can see how far a planet is into that sign. And this becomes important as astrologers when we're looking at aspects, which are the angles that planets make to each other, which if you're newer to astrology, you don't have to worry about, but that's one of the reasons why degrees are very useful. So for example, here in Allison's chart, she was born, it's basically a few days after her birthday. Happy birthday, Allison. So she was born on March 26th, which is right at the beginning of Aries season, right at the beginning of the sun moving into Aries. So here's her sun at 6 degrees of Aries. Whereas if she'd been born a few weeks later, her sun might be at, 20-something Aries. And you can see she's got a lot of Aries in her chart. Her sun is at 6 degrees. This is Saturn at 14, North Node at 18, Mars at the very end of the sign at 29 degrees, that's the last degree of a sign. So that's what the degrees are up to, okay? And it's important to note also that everybody has every sign in their chart. So sometimes I'll say like, oh, where's the new moon in Aries happening in your chart? And someone will say, oh, I don't have any Aries in my chart. And what they mean actually is I don't have any planets in Aries, but everyone has every sign. So for example, as we look at Allison's chart and we see the symbol for Taurus, she doesn't have any planets in Taurus or in Gemini or in Cancer, but she still has those signs in her chart. So we all have all of the signs. We all have the entire wheel of the zodiac. It's just that where you have planets, that's where you're really like majoring, right? So Allison's majoring in Pisces and Aries, for example. Okay. And the houses, which of course we'll be really spending time with today, the houses represent different areas of life or different arenas of experience. We can also think of them as phases of development. And the houses are, of course, the pieces of the pie. In the software that I use, they are conveniently numbered 1 through 12. And that's not always the case. You might have a chart that was made up in some different software and it looks different. I find these are from SolarFire, which I find very easy to read. They make it really legible, which is helpful. So something to notice with the houses is that some, and this can vary from chart to chart, but sometimes you have houses that are quite big and houses that are quite small, right? So in Allison's chart, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, those houses are all quite small, but 10, 11, 12, and 4, 5, 6 are quite big. So this is something to pay attention to, that while signs are always 30 degrees, no exception, every sign gets 30 degrees, but the houses can sometimes be more or less than 30 degrees, okay? And the houses are the part of the chart that really depend on your birth time. So basically, there could be, of course, there were many people who were born on March 26, 1968, and all of those people will have planets in the same sign. The planets aren't going to change much in the course of a day. But what changes based on what time someone was born is where the planets land, which houses the planets land in, and what the rising sign is. And the rising sign is the sign that's at 9 o'clock in the wheel. And that represents the sign that was rising up over the horizon at birth. So this is why you need an accurate birth time to be able to look at the houses and the rising sign. And I do want to mention that just to be confusing and annoying, there are many ways to divide up the pieces of the pie. There are many different house systems, we call them, in existence. And typically, if you look at a chart, it will tell you which house system is being used. So I use Placidus as the default, and it says Placidus. But you might have a chart that says whole signs or equal houses or porphyry or coke, because there's all different house systems. On astro.com, the default is Placidus. So, and I know that's a place where a lot of people go for free charts. And Placidus is how I learned astrology, and I've stuck with it. There's definitely a trend in astrology now to use whole sign houses. And I think it's all good. I think it all works. It's just, and if you are a more advanced student of astrology, then I totally recommend playing with house systems and trying your chart in different house systems, because planets will move to different places and it might be interesting, and see what works best for you. And if you're new to astrology, keep it simple, stick with whatever chart you have, it'll work great. Okay, so I'm gonna just pause there and take us off of screen share and see if there's any questions at this point. Did that all make sense? Anything you want more illumination about? Any confusion? And to unmute yourself, you can just click on that microphone icon in the lower left. Or you can, if you're on screen, you can wave your hand and I'll know to unmute you. I can do it from my end too. Everyone good so far? Yes, with me? Okay. I can only see two faces, so I don't know if everyone else is like asleep or gave up already. Because my whole thing is, this is actually quite simple to do. And I don't know any other astrologers who teach this on a regular basis. And to me, it's like, it's so empowering to be able to use your own chart this way. I see two Latias now. I don't know why that just happened. Oh, no, just back to one. Okay. Do you have a question, Latia, or are you good? You're good. Okay. Everyone's good? Okay. And if you're watching the recording, feel free to ask questions in the Facebook group if anything comes up. Okay. So what we're going to do next is to look at how we'd go about finding the Aries new moon, the new moon that we just had in Allison's chart, and some ideas about how to interpret that. We're also going to look at Karen's chart. And we're also going to look at the full moon. So go back to, okay. So hopefully on the screen is the Aries new moon, although, yes, Aries new moon. Yes, okay, thank you. Okay, so when we look at, I think I mentioned this in our first call, but when we look at the chart of the new moon or the full moon, we don't care about houses. We're totally ignoring the houses. The exception to that would be if you're working with what's called mundane astrology, which is astrology of the world. So let's say you wanted to make a prediction about what's going to happen in the United States based on the new moon chart. Then you would cast the chart for Washington, D.C., or if you're looking at, you know, whatever country, for the capital of that country, state, whatever, capital? Yeah, anyway. And then you can read the houses. Then that'll have significance. So, for example, I'm now writing about new and full moons in August and September, and there's a big solar eclipse that happens in August that's going to be visible across the United States. You probably heard about it. And I was Googling around to see what people were saying about it, and there's some mundane astrologers who are making predictions based on the eclipse chart for the United States, looking at the chart for Washington, D.C. But for our purposes here, all we care about when we're looking at the new moon chart is, where's the new moon happening? And as we know, At the new moon, the sun and the moon come together. Here they are. They're at 7 degrees of Aries. So now we know when we look at Allison's chart, we're looking for 7 degrees of Aries. Okay, back to Allison's chart. Hopefully Allison's chart is now on the screen. Okay, now the thing that we do to find where the new moon is happening is first we look for the symbol of the sign on the outer wheel. So first we're just identifying, okay, where's Aries? And as I mentioned, when we first looked at Allison's chart, here's Aries. Now, this is a case where Allison has what's called an interception. So most of the time, when you look at a chart, you'll see, okay, here's Pisces, 27 degrees of Pisces, and then you'll see the next sign and some degrees. But here it goes from Pisces, starting the 11th house, to Taurus, starting the 12th house. This is one of those big houses in her chart. And what's happened is that the entire 30 degrees of Aries are all contained within the 11th house. This is called an interception. There's a lot of ideas about what interceptions mean. I don't really give them a lot of whatever. They don't seem that interesting to me personally. And of course, astrologers have a whole range of interpretations for their meaning, which could be another class. But here, all we want to know is, where's the new moon happening? This makes it really easy if there's an interception, because if all of Aries is in the 11th house, an Aries new moon, by definition, can only be in Allison's 11th house. And we can, here the degrees are useful though, because we know the new moon is at 7 degrees, and that means it's very close to her sun at 6 degrees of Aries, right? And when we looked at Tara's chart in the first class, now I can't remember what degree, I think Chiron in Aries in her chart was maybe at 5 degrees, I can't remember the exact degree, but very close to the new moon. And this is where it's useful for you, if you notice there's a planet close to where the new moon is happening, then you bring that into your interpretation. You bring that planet into your interpretation, meaning there's a big new beginning related to the themes of that planet. So in terms of the sun, and obviously if the new moon happens close to your sun, that's your birthday, because that's also called the solar return. In astrology, your birthday is the solar return. It's when the sun returns to where it was when you were born. So this new moon is very close to Allison's solar return. And so for her, this is a new beginning in relation to solar themes, her light, her creativity, how she's shining, what makes her happy. The sun has a lot to do with our hearts and just our basic, like, what's fun, what lights this up. So this new moon is super significant to Allison for that reason. We see here, okay, another planet, Saturn, at 14 degrees of Aries. So that's 7 degrees from the new moon. And I think I said in our first class that, you know, the closer it is, the more you're going to notice it, the more powerful it will be. But I would definitely include up to, say, 10 degrees. Like if the new moon is within 10 degrees of one of your planets, I would count that as worth looking at or worthy of interpretation. So I would bring Saturn in as well. And Saturn has a lot to do with our work, our career. It can also have to do with our fears and insecurities. So a new moon on Saturn could be about releasing those, or doing something that scares us to break through those fears or old programs. So that would be part of what's going on here too. And then the North Node a little bit farther away, but Saturn's kind of connecting it. Okay, maybe we'll bring that into, yeah. And then what we want to look at are the themes of the house where the new moon is happening. And the new moon is a seed planting, right? A new beginning. Something is getting started, right? So then we bring in the themes of the 11th house, the house of groups, friends, community. It's also the house of hopes and wishes and the future. So obviously this is a really big deal new moon for Allison. This is happening so close to her birthday, to her sun, to Saturn. And wherever Aries is, as I talked about, there's a lot of, I think I talked about this, the Aries house or houses in your chart is where you can get really fired up and where you can get a lot of energy through starting something new, through taking risks, through doing something that feels brave / scary. So just some ideas here for Allison, and I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions so far. And we're going to look at another example chart so we can, where there's not an interception, so you have to work a little bit harder to find the correct house. But just pause there. Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I don't know if Allison, I don't know if you want to chime in and say anything about your new moon experience thus far. And you don't have to. Hi.
I'm here. Hi. So I just want to say that the reason that I am exhausted and was going to take a nap right now and I'm barely awake is because I have such a profound and amazing and intense and action-packed and courageous and strong and breakthroughing last few days. And so, yeah, things are, yeah, it's a huge new phase on multiple levels, internally, externally. It's been an amazing birthday, one of my best ever.
Woohoo!
And I'm really tired. It's been great.
And it's exhausting. Yeah. And so are you noticing specifically any 11th house themes going on for you?
Yes, I think so. Oh, it's so hard to be really succinct because it's very vast, but I'm having a refocus of where to put my life force and my energy and work and in community. And it's been in a lot of different places, and I'm seeing what to pull back from and what to move into that's going to be most fulfilling and happiest and bring the most joy to people. And yeah, it definitely fits with it for sure. The future and hopes and community and humanity. Yes, it fits.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds very Saturnian too, right? In terms of focusing your energy and what do I want to be spending my time on? What's
yes, and like
priority?
cutting out an old career and really putting energy toward a current career. And yeah, it's very much so.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and I want to mention too that I may have said this on the call, that Jan Spiller calls the right, the 11th house, right, the granddaddy power period. And so basically it's this new moon is meant to be like your woohoo, your most awesomest new moon of the year when it happens in your 11th house. And so for those of you who have the astro techno skills, and again, this is not that complicated, you can do it, your granddaddy power period is the whole time that the sun is going through your 11th house. And this is, in a sense, there's a quality of harvest with the 11th house, because the 10th house, when our 10th house is being activated, that's typically when we're like working our ass off and like just, you know, kind of pushing and making it happen and some struggle. And then the 11th house is like, yay, getting the rewards of our efforts. And so earlier this month, when I was really struggling and having a hard time, I was like, when is my granddaddy power period? And I, you know, for me, this is 11th house time too, since I have Gemini rising as well. And so I like wrote down the
Oh.
dates, and then I was feeling so much better. I was like, it's starting March 19th. It's okay. It'll be okay. I can get through
Oh,
this.
that makes sense because my 10th house is all Pisces and all emotion and
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
inner. And boy, have I been laboring. And there is definitely some breakthroughs and fruits that have been coming.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's kind of, as we know, the houses correlate to the signs.
Yeah.
So the 10th house correlates to Capricorn. It's like, okay, I
All
got some work to
right.
do. I got to climb that mountain. And then the 11th house Aquarius, like, oh, it's just magically unfolding and in the flow. Woohoo. Yeah.
Yay.
So enjoy, Allison.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
chiming in. I'm glad you can make it. Glad you sacrificed your nap for us. Thank you.
I had to be here.
Okay, so any questions? All good. Oh, also, I want to say that if you you can look up your granddaddy power period on Jan Spiller's website. So if you go to janspiller.com, and then I'm not sure, I'll try to find exactly where that is and put the link in the Facebook group. So then you don't have to figure it out yourself. She'll figure it out for you. But it's good to know. It's good to know. Because then the other thing is knowing that, so for me, it's not just like, oh, thank God things are going to get easier, but it's also like, I know that this is the time of year to really go for it. And I typically do, like, I mean, it's also spring equinox season, but I typically do like launch big programs and put a lot of stuff out there and, really kind of go for it. So if you know when your 11th house is going to be activated, that's very helpful. Time to go for it. Okay, we're all good. Questions? You with me? Okay, we're creating Astro Techno Geeks. Okay. All right, so let's look at Karen's chart to find the new moon in her chart because she does not have an interception in that sign. So this will give us a little more practice. Okay, so here's Karen's chart. Hopefully now Karen's chart is up on the screen. Okay, and so again, we start by finding Aries. And again, Aries could be anywhere on the wheel, just depends on the time of birth. But for Karen, we find it between the second and third houses. Okay, so right there, we've narrowed it down. Out of 12 houses, we know it's got to be in the second house or the third house. So that's helpful. So 50%, if you just guess, there's 50% chance we get it right. Okay, but we can get it right because it's not that hard. So her third house begins with 10 degrees of Aries. And we're looking for 7 degrees of Aries. And we know that the chart is going counterclockwise. Here's Pisces, Aries, Taurus. We're going in this direction. So 7 degrees, 7 comes before 10. So we know it's got to be in Karen's second house. Okay. Is that good? Anyone have any question about how I got there? And you can do you feel confident that you can do this in your own chart now? No problem. Okay, and we'll look at more examples with the full moon so you can practice the degrees, but hopefully that's clear. Okay, so she's got a new moon seed planting in the second house. And on the more mundane level, the second house is the house of money and resources. So this is a great new moon for, opening a savings account or making a new investment or doing something, having a new bookkeeping system, some very practical new step around money. At a deeper level, the second house is the house of self-love, self-worth. It's also about our values, what's ultimately really important to me. So it could also be a new moon for realigning with our values and priorities, or maybe taking a step toward healing, something around self-love, self-worth. It's also the house of pleasure, sensuality. The second house has a natural association with the second sign of Taurus. So new beginning in more pleasure, more Venusian pleasure. So those are some ideas for the second house. But again, the big deal here is getting clear about how we got there. Okay, so I'm gonna unshare. Okay, everyone good? How to find the new moon? You can do it in your own chart, no problem. Yes. Okay. Okay, so let's look at the full moon and how to find the full moon in your chart and how to interpret that. So we know with the new moon, we're always talking about the new beginnings, the seed plantings, and also this sense of it's all happening in the dark, right? The new moon is the dark of the moon. Like there's no moon out there. Well, there's a moon out there, but we can't see the moon because it's so close to the sun. And go back to the new moon chart. Sun and moon are right there together. When we look at the full moon chart, this is the chart for the Libra full moon, which is the next full moon coming up on April 10th, the Libra full moon, or 11th, depending on your time zone. And what happens at the full moon is that the sun and the moon are opposite. So I know we talked a little bit about the phase that you were born in and how to figure that out. If you were born with the sun and moon really close, then your new moon, or possibly balsamic moon if it's the very end of the cycle. If you're born with the sun and moon opposite, then you're a full moon baby. Those are the simplest ones to identify. Somewhere in between it gets a little more complicated to figure that out, but it's not that complicated. But anyway, if you look at a chart and see the sun and moon are opposite, it's the full moon. And the full moon always happens in the sign opposite the sun. So right now we have the sun in Aries, which means the full moon will be in Libra. Okay, so the important part here for our purposes is that the full moon is happening at 21 degrees of Libra. And so that's the degree we're going to look at or look for as we look at the example charts. So going back to Allison's chart, again, she's got the interception. So, and the way it works with interceptions is if there's an interception with Aries, there will be an interception with the opposite sign, Libra. So for Allison, her 5th house is all Libra all the time. Every single degree of Libra is in her 5th house. So 21 degrees of Libra, yes, that's there too. So when we look at where the full moon is happening, this is where things are coming to culmination, fruition. Also, the full moon is associated with endings. It doesn't mean every full moon is an ending, but again, it's the opposite energy to a new moon. Sometimes it can be like the, ta-da, here it is. Okay, done now. See ya. Not always, but it can be like, yeah, things are coming to light. Things are manifesting. At the new moon, it's all in the realm of vision. It's all internal. It's in the dark. It's in the ground. It's in the womb. But the full moon is like, oh, there it is. So the house where the full moon is happening will have this, that's where the energy is, the full moon peak energy. Everything gets lit up. So first of all, to know that the house where the full moon is happening is where you might get some great insights and revelations. So the 5th house, house of creativity, house of fun, house of play, house of children, and your inner child. So the full moon in the 5th house can be quite fun. There can be, it can be a very festive time because full moon is party time anyway. And the 5th house is the house of partying, vacation, playtime. So, and maybe there's some revelations and insights about what really makes me happy and what did I want to do with that writing project or that art project? Ah, now I see it. Ah. Or something about, or maybe a relationship with my child, or the 5th house is also the house of lovers and romance. So maybe a revelation about my romantic life or my lover, or something coming to fruition in terms of romance. Or maybe it's the completion of a creative project. Ta-da, here it is, right? So just some ideas here. And then we see that the full moon is happening close to Allison's south node. The full moon's at 21 Libra, south node at 18 Libra. And again, just like with the new moon, we can give it about a 10-degree range. We call it an orb, 10-degree orb in astrology. So within 10 degrees, we still want to look at it. And when the full moon connects with a point or a planet in your chart, again, it's lighting up what that planet represents or what that point represents. And maybe there's a fruition, like let's say it's happening on Mercury, writing, there's some fruition of writing. It's happening on Saturn, there's some culmination in your work life. It's happening on Venus, big revelation about love and values, right? And the south node has a lot to do with where we are coming from on a soul level, on a karmic level. So the full moon on the south node could be maybe letting go of some old Libran way of being. Like Allison's having this major Aries, granddaddy power period, new beginning, birthday, woohoo! In the 11th house, here's where I'm going. Aries, this is what I want. This is what's true for me. This is my desire, my passion. Full moon happens on the south node. Maybe there's something she's letting go of that maybe she realizes she was doing just to please someone else or to be nice. Libra south node, I have that too. Being the nice person. She sees, oh, that's got to go. Giving that up that old way. Or maybe some other, revelation or insight about old karmic ties or soul something, blah, blah. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And now let's look at, and Allison can check in with us coming as we approach the full moon and see how that manifests for her. So let's look at Karen's chart, and I'm going to have somebody tell me where the Libra full moon is happening in her chart. And I will start the process for you by finding Libra. Here's Libra. So we already know it's either the 8th house or the 9th house, but I'm just going to pause. And so when you think you have the answer, you can just unmute yourself by clicking on the mic in the lower left and tell me where the full moon is happening for Karen. Anyone want to guess?
9th house.
Thank you. How do you know? Tell us how you got there.
Well, I see that 17 degrees Libra is in the 9th house, and it's
that's true. That's a giveaway
there. So.
That's good. Okay, if there was nothing in the 9th or 8th house there, do you think you could still get there? And if so, how would you have gotten there?
Well, I would look at the 10 degrees next to Libra at the top and know that it was moving counterclockwise and be in that house because it ends with Scorpio, or the next house starts with Scorpio, so it has to be in there.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you, Jen.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You get the Astro Techno Genius Award.
Jeez.
Okay, perfect. So 9th house. So 9th house for Karen. So the 9th house is one of the phrases for the 9th house is spiritual integration. The 9th house is the house that's naturally connected with the sign Sagittarius. So it's the house of travel, traditionally long journeys over water, but also the house of spiritual vision quests and meditation retreats. And the 9th house is about how we connect with our instinctual wisdom, our higher guidance, like how we connect other than through our rational analytical minds, which is the 3rd house. So full moon in the 9th house is a great time to get away from it all, or at least unplug computer and phone and go out into nature and connect with some deeper truth that you can only get to by feeling it. And as Jen pointed out, she's got something in here at 17 degrees, and that's quite close to the full moon at 21. This is the planet Uranus, which is the planet of radical genius and innovation and creative breakthrough, being an unconventional, radical revolutionary. So having a full moon conjunct Uranus could be some insights and revelations and breakthroughs that are very radical and exciting. And also maybe there's something here about really, I mean, I know Karen is an artist, a really awesome artist, and maybe, and here we are Libra, the sign of art and aesthetics and beauty. So maybe there's something about really liberating her creative genius or shining the light on her, you know, unconventional, unusual artist self. Something like that come into light. So that's exciting. Okay, so again, I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions about anything. And then I think we'll have time to talk about Mercury retro. Oh, and I see someone in the chat. The full moon is at 21 Libra.
And how did you know that, Emily? Like, how did you know?
I knew it because I looked at the chart. Here, we'll go back.
The original chart we looked at.
This is there. Do you see the full moon chart? Is it coming up?
Okay, got it.
Yep. So basically, you know, and I'm surprised that the wee moon calendar doesn't have the times in it for the new and full moon, Kara. That's annoying, frankly.
Well, I have the wall calendar,
The
so
wall
maybe
calendar, yeah.
Maybe it's in the date book.
Still,
Okay.
very annoying. Wee moon, come on. Yeah, so basically, so it is in the date book. And so basically, like, I look at what time it's happening, I draw up the chart, and then that's how I see the degrees.
Okay.
And I think typically online there's places that will tell you. I just don't know what the go-to would be for that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yes, you're welcome. I guess the quick and dirty too would be if you know what day the full moon is happening, then it's easy to see what degree the sun is at if you just have a little, you know, day-to-day ephemeris, which I don't know if the calendar has. But if you know that the sun is at 21 degrees at the full moon, then the moon has to be at 21 degrees in the opposite sign. Okay. Other questions? Is everyone a lunation expert now? You all feel confident and comfortable finding the new and full moon before we get a little more complicated with Mercury retrograde? Okay. I'm going to assume that's a yes. And again, if you're watching the replay, ask questions in the Facebook group if anything's not clear. Okay, so with Mercury retrograde, and again, just yesterday we entered the shadow period, meaning the influence is just starting for Mercury retrograde, but it officially happens from April 9th to May 3rd. And so basically when Mercury goes retrograde, it's a time for all of the words like review and renew, regenerate, reconnect, rethink, revise, revisit, re. And the cool thing is if you know which house or houses it's happening in, you can see like, well, what's the focus? Where do I need to like back up and redo or reconnect or rethink in order to move forward? Because as we know, Mercury retrograde is not just about, you know, annoying us, or like there's a purpose. We're supposed to, like, there's something that we need to go back to, something maybe we skipped over in our rush ahead. We need to back up, slow down, maybe finish something from the past or redo something from the past to support us in moving forward. So it's helpful to know which areas of life is that process focused on. What's my assignment for this Mercury retrograde period? And so here with Mercury retrograde, we're not just looking for 1 degree, we're looking for a range of degrees, right? Because Mercury will start somewhere, go back, start again, which means Mercury will go backy forthy 3 times over that range of degrees, that section of your chart. Okay, so the degrees in this case are 24 degrees of Aries to 4 degrees of Taurus. So Mercury retrograde will start at 4 degrees of Taurus, and then Mercury backs up to 24 degrees of Aries, and then moves forward again. So this is the range of degrees that we're going to look for. And let's start with Allison's chart. Again, that one's going to be easier. Maybe. Let's see. Okay, so we already know that all of the Aries is in Allison's 11th house. But our question here will be, is Mercury retrograde going to get up into her 12th house, which starts with 7 degrees of Taurus, or is it going to be in her 11th house the whole time? And hopefully it's just so obvious, or hopefully you figured it out without too much work, that it's going to be in her 11th house the whole time, because Mercury goes retrograde at 4 degrees of Aries, so it's still within the 11th house when it goes retrograde, and then it goes back to 24 here, 24 Aries. So it'll be in this range, the end of her 11th house. So this is kind of interesting, right? Because she's got this new moon, she's all fired up for these 11th house new beginnings, and then along comes Mercury retrograde in the 11th house, and so maybe there'll be some rethinking, you know, or revising, like, oh, I thought it was this. Oh, wait a minute, back up, maybe it's that. And we do have this theme of reconnection with Mercury retrograde, and each of the houses are associated with different people, and I put those on the handout. And I know that, you know, the houses handout, which is on the resource page, it's very, like, there's just very short little descriptions for each house, but there are, cafeastrology.com has good house descriptions, and astro.com has good house descriptions, so it's worth delving into more of the details if you want to learn more about a house. But basically, the 11th house is the house of friends, and not so much your best friends, that's more like 7th house, but more like your social group, teammates, allies. So with Mercury retro in the 11th, it could be about reconnecting. Maybe there's people from Allison's past, people she used to hang out with, or groups she used to be connected with, an organization she used to volunteer with, or something that's helpful to go back and reconnect in order to support her with these new directions that she's wanting to go in with this fired up new moon. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And let's look at Karen's chart, and I'm going to have someone else tell me which house or houses it's happening in. And so again, we're looking for Aries and Taurus, finding those in the bottom here. And so we want to know which house or houses contain, we're looking for the range from 24 degrees of Aries to 4 degrees of Taurus. And again, I'll wait for one of you astro geniuses to figure that out, and unmute yourself and let me know what you come up with. Oh, what has that?
Third house.
Third house, yay! How do you know? Explain yourself.
Because her third house starts at 10 degrees Aries, and the next house, the fourth house, starts at 10 degrees Taurus, so it falls in there.
Exactly, right? So 24 is going to be maybe about here, and 4 is going to be maybe about here. And so all of Mercury retrograde is in Karen's third house. But we know, just put it out there, it's possible that it could be in more than one house, and that might be the case in your chart. So pay attention. Could be more than one house, just happens to be all in one house for both of these examples. So the third house is actually a house that has a natural association with Mercury because it's associated with the third sign of Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury. So the third house is the house of communication and learning and the mind. The people it's connected to are neighbors and siblings and relatives and students. Basically people we tend to connect with on a daily basis because the third house is like our everyday environment. So there could be some connections and reconnections and taking a step back in those areas. And maybe, I don't know that this is necessarily true, but we know that during Mercury retro, there's the potential for miscommunications and some confusion. And with Mercury going retrograde in the third house of communication, that might be more likely. And this can be good to know because maybe Karen wants to, double check the details or reread that email before sending it, or just be a little more like paying attention to communications. Because the thing about Mercury retrograde is it's a time when our rational minds don't work we're not as sharp as usual, but our intuitive minds are a lot stronger. And so this is why those things happen with miscommunications or, oops, I totally forgot that was the time we were meeting, I showed up an hour later, whatever, because our minds just aren't working in that way. But it's great for getting a new perspective on something or opening up our intuition more, seeing things in a whole different way. Very useful for that. Okay, so again, we can pause for questions. Does everyone feel like they can find Mercury retrograde in your own chart, where it's happening in your own chart? And have some sense of how to interpret that or how to work with that. Okay.
I have a question.
Awesome.
That might be a really stupid question, but I'm going to ask you.
They're my favorite. Thank you. Make it really stupid.
So I'll do my best. So if Mercury retrograde is happening on top of a planet that I was born with in retrograde, does that cancel out the retrograde?
Nope. What planet is it?
It's Mars in Aries at 26 degrees.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So yeah, I didn't know.
Okay, so your Mars is at 26 degrees. So that's, I would say that's close enough to count because, actually, right, because it'll go back over, so it'll station really close to, yeah. Okay, so this would be really rethinking all things Mars. So, and since you were born with Mars retrograde, there's already an emphasis on needing to go very deep within yourself and maybe have a slower process around knowing your desires, knowing what you want and getting that clarity, right? Whenever a planet is retrograde in the birth chart, it's like where we have to do things our own way and typically need to take more time with the process because retrograde is all about the inside job, really turns the energy inward at a very deep level. So Mars retrograde, it's like, really needing to take your time to know what you want. Mercury going retrograde over your Mars retrograde would then be, rethinking what are my goals? What am I excited about? Big regeneration of your fire. Since we have Mercury part-time retrograde in Aries, starting out in Taurus, going back to Aries, I think that's an overall theme anyway of this Mercury retrograde is what really fires me up. What am I excited about? Rethinking our passions and vitality. And here's Mercury interacting with Mars, ruler of Aries. So making that even a stronger theme. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I see a question. Andre. Okay, Andre asks a question about an earlier topic. What briefly do the sizes of the houses in the birth chart signify? So they don't really have an interpretive meaning, the size of the houses in the birth chart. It's more that houses get wonkier the farther you were born from the equator, farther from the equator that you were born. So, so if someone's born in Alaska, for example, then they can have really teeny tiny houses and like giant houses. And when it gets that extreme, I actually change to a different house system. And I use equal houses or whole signs, which make all the houses the same size. So it's less of a, it has more to do with where you were born. And then the way it ends up working is that if you do have a bigger house, it's going to mean that when there's a transit, when a planet in the sky is moving through that house, it's going to be there for longer. Or if it's a smaller house, it'll be there for less time. So the bigger houses will tend to get more action from the astro influences. Oh, I see another. Oh, okay. Cool. Good question. Anyone else? Any questions?
Emily, I just have a question since we're doing this. We did it with Mercury. Do you happen to know the Venus retrograde degrees?
I happen to know. Yes,
You
I
do.
do.
Okay, I thought you would.
So Venus will go direct at 26 Pisces. And
Okay.
she started her retrograde at 13 Aries.
Okay, thank you.
So 26 Pisces to 13 Aries if you want to look at where Venus is retrograde in your chart.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other questions? Everyone feel good about being an astro geek? I'm going to assume that's a yes. All right. All right, ladies. Oh, I see someone in the chat. Jen says that was like a do you happen to have any Grey Poupon moment. Yes, it was. Will the recording be available for a long time? Yes, the recording will be up on the resource page and it'll be available indefinitely. So yeah, I mean, for the next 6 months and beyond, because I'll keep the resource page up after the class. Yay, okay. Great. All right, ladies, thanks for being with me. Oops. Yes, someone says yay. And yeah, happy finding lunations and Mercury retrograde in your chart. And you know, I'm always curious when. Oh, good. Pinky waited until now to chime in. We did pretty well. I'm always curious to know where things are happening in your own chart. So as you share in the Facebook group, you know, your new moon wishes or what's coming up for you at the full moon. It's actually just astro research to hear from each other. Oh, and where's that happening for you, right? So we get to learn from each other. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So have a great night, and thanks for being here with me. And our next call will be for the Libra full moon in another week and a half or so.
Thank you,
Bye.
Emily.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.